long ago, before there was anything, the world in its infancy seemed to bask and sigh at its primordial and unprecedented time period of peace. Gaia, as the world was called, had not yet been fractured into the shattered planes as we would come to know it today. Humans, indeed humans, roamed the land together, wholly and unapologetically, and there was no judgment, nor death, nor the very concept of the sin of war. Humans were given one singular purpose as corporeal beings of the ground, and it was to be our duty to fulfill that given purpose as best as we could.
We were to tend to the land and the seas with nothing but the clothes off our back. And we continued to manage that duty well for thousands of years. Humanity appeared to live a quiet but happy existence, innocent from the brazen cruelty of the darkness. That was until the mortals began to develop an unparalleled higher sense of intelligence that had not always been there before. They became more curious, more skeptical.
And thus, proper societies began to form. Soul magic, as it is most commonly known, began its earliest stages of documentation by the humans. Bright and warm, soul magic, in the context of mortals, is an obscure form of magic focused on outwardly manifesting the elements of your natural connection to Gaia's spirit. In its rawest of configurations, however, soul magic bore certain addictive properties that drove the humans absolutely mad. And without the proper care and attention required of the humans, the land and the seas began to wither away, slowly but surely.
After decades of enduring the polluted lands without any sign of remediation, a group of scientists and researchers were sent out to document any potential source of corruption, in order to possibly find a way to correct humanity's earliest primal mistake. And in that team of scientists and researchers was a young and plucky upstart with hair as white as snow. Her name was Alina.
No one could deny the righteousness and determination Alina possessed in those gleaming hazel eyes of hers. She sought to be a pillar for change, and couldn't bear the thought of remaining idle as the world seemed to collapse around her. Regardless, the members of her team laughed and mocked her, dismissing her entirely, as despite her best intentions, they merely saw her existence as weak and helpless. And so, she explored further and alone.
Separated from the group, the forest greeted Alina with a dark, cold silence. Yet determined to prove the doubters wrong, she traveled further, following the winding paths of darkened vines and poisoned flora.
When suddenly, a transcendent presence called out to her.
Come closer, my child. Come further into the light of my heart, and you will come to know the truest of understandings.
Who said that?
Curiosity overcame Alina, and she was unable to resist the internal pull of the heavenly presence calling out to her. She traced the blackened vines and branches further, allowing herself to be led into a clearing of affected azure. Ahead stood a barren waterfall, overrun with a multitude of black and purple vines, trees decaying. They looked on in pity, wondering what the cause of such a problem could have been. They moved closer to the empty pool and allowed their minds to yield and succumb to the divine presence. At last, it spoke.
Alina, I know more about your soul than you could ever fathom, and I can sense that your heart is pure and full of good intention. If you free water and allow its serenity to flow peacefully through you, I will grant you the power to save your time root.
And so, obeying orders, the human Alina traveled up to the top of the mountain to search for the original source point of the cascade. With all their might, they pulled and pulled at the branches until the bright blue water was instantly set free, plunging into the deep ethereal pool below.
Overwhelmed with a sudden sense of determination, Alina jumped over the rocky ledge and into the newly living water. She bathed and drank from the heart merrily, and she was the happiest she'd ever been in a long time.
As she floated in the water, her mind at a standstill, at once came a large beam of energy from the pool that shot upwards into the sky, cracking Gaia in half. 2 nations were then formed as a result. Lumen for the elemental beings of Inferno, Zephyr, water,
and the shore.
Whilst Augustus was reserved for the rest of us, the lowly and rejected. Unbeknownst to her, however, this true display of raw soul magic would mark the catalyst event for all.
As for Alina herself, she would come back with divine powers so extraordinary, life itself began to revel in her very presence. With a newfound sense of compassion, she wanted to use her powers for the greater good of her fellow people and protect those who were less fortunate in a world full of corruption. But she knew she wouldn't be able to do it alone. So she put in place an allegiance of equal-minded souls who also sought to be reasons for change. And thus, the Protectors were formed, to serve and defend the world as long as they all shall live.
Not all mortals felt kindly towards them, however. One metamorph man thought the modern magic system to be an unfair display of corruption and power, and sought to take everyone's soul magic away for himself. He delved into archives and archives of forbidden magic and went on a total rampage. Far and wide, he traveled across the lands for souls he could prey on and consume, growing more and more powerful by the decade.
Which is why we're here today.
That's right.
With Alina's divine help, the souls of her friends lived on in us, their descendants. We are scattered across the shattered plains, and if he is left alive, we may be the last generation who could truly complete what our ancestors couldn't. We are the Protector's wish.